During the 13th century, an abbot speaking to a congregation of monks found that many of his listeners had fallen asleep. In desperation, the abbot raised his voice and declared, "I will tell you something new and great. There was once a mighty king, whose name was Arthur." The words had an electrifying effect. Though the monks couldn't stay awake to hear the abbot's thoughts on holy matters, they perked up at the mention of a magical name, Arthur. A king who was the epitome of good against evil, light against dark, and that eternal, never-ending struggle between right and wrong. Many of us only know of Sir Lancelot and Queen Guinevere, but there are many other characters that were cornerstones to the legends and stories surrounding Camelot, the Round Table, and the Holy Grail. What was the significance of the Lady of the Lake, King Mark, Merlin the Magician, Sir Mordred, and Morgan Le Fay? But perhaps in all of this, the actual question that arises is, was King Arthur actually a real person, or simply a hero of Celtic mythology? We'll have to dive into his story to find out. Arthur, a Celtic king born of deceit and adultery, grew to become one of the most famous rulers of Britain. He was a warrior, a knight, and a king who killed giants, witches, and monsters, and led a band of heroes on many daring adventures. He was known for his Knights of the Round Table and for uniting the peoples of his land. Even though his end was tragic, he is still known and celebrated all over the world today. His story is painted on the halls of the British Parliament. Arthur's story begins with Uther Pendragon, his father. Pendragon is smitten by Igraine, the wife of the Duke of Cornwall. Disguising himself as Igraine's husband, he sneaks into her bed and she conceives Arthur. Merlin the wizard raises Arthur away from his parents. It is Merlin who had designed for Arthur's father Uther a great round table at which 150 knights could sit. Upon Uther's death, the knights do not know who should take his place. Merlin tells them that whoever could draw a mysterious sword out of a stone should be the next king. Many try, but all fail. Then, one day, Arthur, who is attending his foster brother, Sir Kay, is sent to find a sword and to replace his brother's broken one. He comes upon the magical sword, Excalibur, in the stone, and not knowing the prophecy, drew it out. Thus, he is proclaimed the new king. Arthur unites Britain and drives off the invading Saxons. He becomes a benevolent and well-loved king. His reign is known for its heroic deeds and chivalric romance. In fact, the name of his castle, Camelot, has become to signify a golden age. The greatest quest of Arthur and his knights is the quest for the mythical Holy Grail, from which Jesus drank at the Last Supper. While King Arthur is never to find the Holy Grail himself, his knight, Sir Galahad, does because of his purity of heart. King Arthur marries Guinevere, daughter of the King of Scotland. Merlin tries to warn him against the marriage because Guinevere is in love with Sir Lancelot. When Arthur discovers that his wife and Sir Lancelot are having an affair, Sir Lancelot flees for France and Arthur pursues him. In his absence, Arthur's nephew Mordred seizes power. Arthur returns to Britain and a terrible battle ensues, during which most of his knights die and he is grievously wounded. He has Excalibur thrown back into the lake and boards a boat from the magical Isle of Avalon. Here, he hopes to be cured of his wounds so that he might return to lead his people again. For this reason, Arthur is called the once and future king. Tracing the footsteps of King Arthur. He doesn't appear in the only surviving contemporary source about the Saxon invasion, in which the Celtic monk Gildas wrote of a real-life battle at Mons Badonicus around 500 CE. Several hundred years later, Arthur appears for the first time in the writings of a Welsh historian named Nennius, who gave a list of 12 battles the warrior king supposedly fought. All drawn from Welsh poetry, the battles took place so many different times and places it would have been impossible for one man to have participated in all of them. Later, Welsh writers drew on Nennius's work, and Arthur's fame spread beyond Wales and the Celtic world, particularly after the Norman conquest of 1066 connected England to northern France. The main source for the Arthurian legend, popularized in the 12th century, is Geoffrey of Monmouth's book, The History of the Kings of Britain, which chronicles the lives of the earliest British rulers. Although there are few sparse references to an Arthur figure in the documents from the 9th and 10th century, Geoffrey gives the first extensive account of King Arthur's life and exploits. The story begins when Arthur is conceived at Tintagel Castle, where the wizard Merlin transforms King Uther Pendragon into the likeness of the Duke of Cornwall, so that Uther can spend the evening with Gorlois's wife. Arthur later inherits the British throne at the age of 15 and leads the Britons in several epic battles against the invading Saxons, eventually defeating them. He goes on to extend his empire to Ireland, Iceland, Norway, and Gaul, before being betrayed by his nephew Mordred and killed in battle. While many familiar aspects of King Arthur's story are included in Monmouth's version, he does not mention Camelot, Lancelot, the Holy Grail, the Sword in the Stone, or the chivalric knights of the Round Table. According to Bournemouth University archaeologist Miles Russell, many details were added to the story centuries later to make Arthur a more appealing figure. Truth be told, the Arthur of Geoffrey is a deeply unlikable sociopath, a violent, quick-to-anger, murderous thug. He is someone who very much fits the Dark Age idea of a successful king, but not a hero for the Middle Ages. Monmouth's account of Arthur is frequently derided by today's historians, as it was even by his own peers. At best, he is chastised for getting his facts wrong. At worst, he is accused of inventing the entire tale. Monmouth himself claimed to have simply translated a very ancient book into Latin, but that source material has never been identified. Furthermore, no proof of Arthur's existence has been covered, even at Tintagel. Russell believes that Monmouth cobbled together various different ancient tales, characters, and episodes to create his now beloved Arthur figure. It is not an entirely original story, as it borrows heavily from the exploits of other well-known legendary rulers. While others believe the legendary figure of Arthur stands a real historic personage, a great leader named Arturus, who championed the Celtic Britons against the Anglo-Saxons in the 5th century. However, his name doesn't appear in any reliable history of the period, probably because Arthurus was not his proper name, but a title meaning bear. Although the Saxons finally conquered Britain, the Celtic people retained a degree of independence and kept alive the memory of old champions like Arturus. Celtic bards traveled from court to court, recounting folk tales of the past. Over time, Arturus, the military leader, became King Arthur of England. Some historians believe Arthur was Duke of Britain, a Roman title. However, by 500 CE, such titles had become vague, and king was the customary designation of Celtic leaders. When Roman rule faded on the island, the old kingly families of the tribes and regions re-emerged. From hints found in ancient records, we can glean a picture of Arthur as a warrior who was successful for a time, only to die tragically in a civil war after a mysterious battle of Camlan in 537 CE or thereabouts. Arthur's father may have been Ambrosius or Lionus, himself a Duke of Britain. The decades between Ambrosius's death sometime after 495 and Arthur's own demise some 40 years later were a time of shifting fortune and wide-ranging struggles. This may explain the myriad of places in Britain that claim a connection to the legendary king. So was King Arthur real? Did he exist as a true king? Was he a Celtic hero, ruler, and conqueror, or the romantic medieval knight in shining armor? While there is no document to prove Arthur's existence, and archaeologists have found no objects bearing his name, his mythic power would only grow strong as the centuries passed. English rulers from Henry VIII to Queen Victoria have appropriated the Arthur legend for political purposes, while countless writers, painters, photographers, filmmakers, and other artists have produced their own versions for posterity. And even if the legend of King Arthur may be only a myth, it's still a good one. What do you think? Comment down in the section below and don't forget to like and subscribe.